between different countries, of course, it's important that there's facilitation and cooperation to help build resiliency against cyber attacks. That being said, cyber attacks are very global in their nature, and so there's no, it's a boundaryless problem in a lot of cases. And when we look at the problem holistically, it would appear that there really is no durable solution. The number of bad actors is numbered in the millions if you actually look at the people. If you consider some of the largest security shows in the region, you'll have 20,000-30,000 attendees at some of these security forums and international security shows, and you say to yourself for a moment, how is it possible that there's so many people securing? How big is the army that we're battling? And the truth is, it's in the millions. And these are smart people in lots of countries where there aren't as many options for how to earn money, and you have a very lucrative business. People can earn quite good income with cybercrime, and the chance of prosecution is very, very, very low. In fact, on a global basis, the number of people that are being incarcerated at any one time from cybercrimes is in the hundreds, and yet if you look at for other petty crimes that people do, it's in the millions. And so it's a very easy way to make money globally. There's no borders. You get to work from home. You pick your own hours, and your chance of prosecution is almost zero. And so, of course, we're going to have a problem, and of course, this problem is going to get worse. And yes, there are state actors, but the faces and the names of the state actors can change on any given day. And so the real essence of resilience and security starts with the companies, and the assets which are being impaired or stolen or denigrated are all information assets. And we believe that's an emerging message in cyber warfare and cybersecurity, is that you protect the assets and don't worry so much about the venues and the means of access. The internet is not the problem. The internet is the route to the assets, but it's the assets that you need to protect. What I would say is that this, in the last 2 years during the pandemic, has become geometrically more difficult, because the surface area of the attack surface that people can go after has gotten so much larger, because instead of people being safely behind a firewall in an office, they may be working from any one of hundreds of places. They could be working from a coffee shop. They could be working from their homes. They could be working from new devices instead of a computer in the office. So the work of securing those information assets has become exponentially more difficult in the last 2 years, and it doesn't appear as though we're going back to any normal, or what we historically would have thought was a normal work environment anytime soon.
Give me an idea of what the Forcepoint solution stack looks like today, specifically the enterprise or the national critical infrastructure or OT. What is the solution stack? What does Forcepoint offer over there?
At Forcepoint, we have two different organizations. In many cases, we have a organization and a product family that supports the commercial enterprises, and I'll talk about that one a little bit first. But that is we've embraced a methodology called zero trust, and zero trust is all about saying, well, there's no, we do not. The historical way that people have embraced security is they say trust but verify, and so I verify your identity and I let you into the network, and then you have free access to the information assets. We've embraced And many companies, many of our customers, and a lot of other security providers in many cases have embraced something called zero trust, which means we do not, trust is not implied, trust is not granted, trust is something that is reserved for the actual moment when the data and the user intersect at the application. In addition, what that means is that you need to have a uniform edge, a security edge that's distributed, and that can be at somebody's home, and somebody coffee shop, on a PC, on a phone, whatever. And that's the expression in the industry is SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, and so those are pieces of software that we deploy throughout any type of device that a person works on. So our architecture is based on zero trust, and the edge devices that we deploy allow us to have enforcement points in all different types of interfaces for our users. Now, I do want to just share with you, I talk about zero trust. I think of zero trust as sometimes as like bleach. So if you think about the germs that you may have on your phone or that you may have on this table or whatever, the way traditionally antivirus or malware detection or firewalls have worked is they look for malicious content and then they identify it. And the way bleach works is it doesn't care. I don't need to identify. I just need to bleach it. I need to make sure it's not there. And that's what the philosophy of zero trust is to use bleach and eliminate all the germs, the good and the bad. It doesn't matter, and I don't need to take a catalog of them. So that's what zero trust is about. The other aspect of the company, so that's the commercial business. That's our approach, and it's found a lot of success. The other aspect of the business, which comes from our heritage as a company that we were spun out of a large U.S. defense contractor, and they had built a business for what is termed critical infrastructure, and that might be different utilities, railways, nuclear power plants, these types of legacy critical infrastructures, gas pipelines, medical systems often. These are legacy deployments that are very critical to nation states and for health and safety situations, but they often have very legacy interfaces, and so we have built the methodology is called an air gap methodology, but techniques for allowing people to get access to these systems without exposing them to hackers or other people that are trying to compromise those systems. So those are our two businesses: a commercial business based on zero trust and edge deployments of solutions, and then a critical infrastructure business. And we've had a lot of success in Dubai and in the Middle East and the region in general in both of those areas.
So now, I just want to get your thoughts on the Russian-Ukrainian thing without actually naming or taking sides or anything. So when one looks at what's happening, I mean, obviously there are few questions which one looks for answers from vendors such as yourself, which are knowledgeable. And one is that how do you define a cyber war? I mean, what are the elements of a cyber war where it moves from a large scale, sophisticated threat actor or advanced threat attacks into something which is much more wider? Is it scale? Is it frequency? Is it randomness? What is the characteristic? How do you actually define a cyber war?
Yeah, I think I would have to say that that is an evolving definition of cyber war, and there seems to be a lot of creativity at this point, and I actually think you're seeing it in the current conflict. There is you see things like deep fakes, and you see false news, or who would have thought 20 years ago of the idea of putting on social media an announcement that one side has surrendered and you should lay your weapons down. I mean, and those types of things are happening all the time right now. There's no cyber espionage. There's no system that's been compromised, and yet I think that is part of cyber warfare today. Is dissemination of false information, leveraging all these different types of media and these new channels of communications. I saw, and I think it's being done by both sides. By the way, you can see online this morning. I saw websites talking about missing soldiers from each party, and you can call, and they're recording, and then they're publishing it. It's just a very interesting element. I think there's also, of course, elements trying to understand the physical aspects of warfare and trying to interfere with those. Where are troops providing false information about the deployment of resources? And then, of course, there's so much technology and communications infrastructure in the way that people that people conduct modern warfare, that violating any of those systems or compromising those systems or tearing down or infiltrating any of those systems. So I think it's multidimensional these days, and probably the most dangerous types of cyber warfare are the easiest to perpetrate. And in the areas of social media and deep fakes and dissemination of incorrect information, these types of things.
Okay, understood on the creativity part of it. So let's go to the actual modus operandi. If you push aside the social media and we look at so for example, the Ukrainian websites have been under attack for the last 5, 6, 7 days, right? I mean, that's one of the, let's say, non-fake news which is over there. Another one was the takedown of the wind systems, 5,000 of them across Europe, right? The control systems of these wind turbines, I think the STATCOM or SATCOM, there's something like that. And the relentless DDoS attacks on Ukrainian, and then probably the relentless attacks on the Russian side. So does this fall into a certain pattern that the frequency and the scale decides whether it's a daily incident, or is it a much more national cyber war incident?
I mean, the types of attacks that you talked about are best perpetrated by large organizations, right? They need scale. There's graffiti, there's disabling of sites, but things like DDoS attacks or other types of congestive approaches to confuse or to obfuscate communications. Those are nation state. Those are very comfortable areas for nation states to operate in. I guess I'm not totally understanding the question.
No, I'm saying that if a certain country, let's say the national ministry websites and things like that, are under attack continuously, day after day after day,
right?
Does that classify as a war?
I think so. If you clog up traditional communication routes. Now, all of the attacks you're talking about are all internet-based attacks. They all leverage the internet protocol. I think more and more you are seeing a lot of agencies, especially in warfare and in defense, leveraging communication protocols that are not as easily defeated. And so while I think it actually has very little impact on communications, military communications. I don't think there's much impact there at all. But they're certainly in the public eye and in website and in public service and in all the types of broad communications. The internet protocol was not built and never designed with a huge amount of point-to-point integrity as part of its design principle. It was always a very open standard. It's very easy to create collisions in the communication paths that cause outages, and so I don't really think it's having much of an impact on the disruption of military campaigns. It's a nuisance to people that are leveraging the internet for other types of communications.
Okay, great. That's a very interesting point. So basically, we are splitting war into the military side and civil side. So on the civil side, you are saying that that is definitely a scale of war where uh, sites are not accessible and things like that. And on the military side, in terms of communication and coordination, yeah, that's something which obviously would have much more restricted access. But do the cyber threat actors actually attack on the military and the defense side, or is it then just left these threat actors essentially focusing only on the civil side?
I would assume that the vast majority of the threat actors are working in the civil domain, and that's most threat actors are after economic reward, and of course that's going to work in the public networks. The military networks are generally completely sealed off from those environments.
Yeah, so let's just talk on the civil side. The military side is, of course, it's not it's not in the frame of discussion. But if on the civil side, as these threat actors, if they are to go on for a long time, I mean days and days. I mean, you need, first of all, you need money and energy, right? I mean, there's a lot of consumption of power and there's a lot of consumption of time and resources. So, is it the state which will be investing, or does the state? So my question is whether when the state actors declare war and the other networks join in, are they then, do they coordinate amongst themselves to the best of your knowledge, or do they just leave it to see what gains everybody can make in this whole thing?
Well, you saw the anonymous attacks that came, and you could say that's a loose federation of independent groups that did collaborate to perpetrate attacks, whatever side of the conflict you take. But I do think you see both. You see groups that are collaborating to obfuscate, and then you have state actors that are building campaigns and leveraging vast resources. And you used the example earlier, and I think it's an interesting one of DDoS. There is not a great protection against a massive DDoS attack. There's not anything really inherent in the networks that can protect against that. It is a flood of traffic, a SYNAC flood. And so there's not really anything you can do about it. And somebody that wants to launch a DDoS attack generally can. Whether or not that's organized and sustained is another thing altogether. A lot of those, I would say a lot of the nuisance attacks are exactly that. And the attacks that are more insidious are the ones that are for profit or to achieve a political gain. But a lot of the attacks today that you're referring to are just making communication difficult and adding to the fog of war, I guess.
That's an interesting term, adding to the fog of war. And essentially, these mercenaries who jump in on the bandwagon of, so to say, a national collaboration, essentially are looking for their own gains, right?
Well, they would do it it could be a political gain, but yeah, they're motivated. They have their own motivations.
The strange question now comes that in the case of Ukraine, of course, there is a collapse of the civil infrastructure. But in case the civil infrastructure was there, would the service providers have a defensive role? I mean, for example, let's assume the country is not attacked physically; it's just a cyber to cyber warfare. The service providers and the national, this national infrastructure would exist. Will they be called in to play a defensive role?
That's an interesting view. Yes, I think they're probably the only ones that could, because they are at the source. They are at the nexus of the attack. And as you know, if you're just an enterprise, for instance, or a government website, you can be overwhelmed very, very quickly. But you're overwhelmed by traffic that is propagating through the carrier. And so the carrier is, and I think you're seeing this more and more in the solutions. It is the carriers that are the ones that are administering, preventing, and detecting a lot of these attacks. And there is really no other place to do it. If you understand the nature of internet protocol and you understand the nature of these attacks, the core of the carrier network or the service provider network is where the remedy can be applied the easiest. Very difficult. I mean, think about it. If you're on the receiving end of a website and there's not much you can do to stop the carrier from filling your consuming all of your bandwidth with an attack or some sort of artificial congestion.
Okay, great. So if the civil infrastructure is not damaged, essentially it becomes a service provider to service provider type of warfare, with one being on the offensive, one being on the defensive.
Yeah, I do think one interesting thing, if I can just make a comment on the Ukraine situation, is that certainly either side could have torn down the networks, and neither did. So the networks are open, and that must, to me, that implies that both sides believe that they can use those networks to their advantage, or they would have taken them down. I mean, there's a limited number of egress points in and out of the country, and you could stop the communicate. I mean, certainly there's a finite number of cell towers, for instance. There's a finite number of satellite uplinks. There's a finite number of facilities that you could theoretically destroy.
Yeah.
And yet both sides have decided, I think, at some level that it's better to be able to communicate over this unsecure channel and propagate a cyber warfare at the same time that regular warfare is happening.
Understood. So essentially, you're talking about the co-location and the large scale data centers and the submarine cable. I mean, the interconnectivity points.
Yeah, there's a finite number of internet points of presence in any country, and you certainly they're well known where they are. Yes. People could have taken a different approach. I think if we put it a different way, if you wanted to blind a country, I think it's maybe easier than one would think. But people are choosing not to do that, believing that there is some sort of an advantage to be had by open, unprotected communications.
There could be multiple reasons for it, but it's a valid point that both countries are still functioning from a network point of view and communication point of view, and that part has not been taken down. Now, I think that's more or less the type of questions which I wanted on the threat actor and the national threat actor and this thing. Just to conclude now, in terms of the products and solutions of Forcepoint, are we seeing what is the degree of automation, autonomous automation, advanced intelligence, the ability for the solution to proactively assist the users without necessarily having skilled resources? How far have we progressed over there from the point of view in Forcepoint? Go ahead.
Well, I think in general, in our solutions, we're trying to take the users out of the equation altogether. That's a fool's errand. People do dumb things. They leave default passwords. They open emails they shouldn't. They visit websites that are corrupted. You need to be completely insulated, I think, from the user, and our solutions do exactly that. As I mentioned earlier, we have embraced a zero trust architecture, which not only means I don't trust the user, but I don't trust the infrastructure either. And just the fact that I know who somebody is, or the fact that I know where somebody is, does not in and of itself constitute a degree of trust. And I think that's the fundamental, the quintessential element of the architecture that we've embraced. Others have embraced it as well. And I do believe it holds the promise of dramatically simplifying security. Of many companies have 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 different security products. Many companies have 5,000, 10,000 alerts per day that they're dealing with. Many companies have hundreds of security operations specialists. We believe that some of these new paradigms finally hold some promise for reducing some of those challenges.
For the SOC specifically, I mean, for the security organization, where have we reached in terms of automation? It's still work in progress.
It's not an area that we really focus on. We focus on reducing the number of events that go into the SOC. Okay. But there's a lot of good products out there that do help with SOC automation.